Welcome into the Nat Bros podcast. I'm Nick. He's Andrew, and we are inviting you back into our continued conversation of sovereignty, the battle for the hearts and the minds of men. Today, we're going to continue our discussion of part three, the code of conduct, and this is going to be chapter 9, discernment. Before we go any further, this is a second recording, so we're going to try and give you. We've already recorded once, but unfortunately, I made a huge mistake and decided that I was going to move to a different location while recording, which is a dumb thing to do. And so I've learned my lesson officially and will not be doing that again in the future. But this is episode 11. We are glad that you are here. And we are looking forward to discussing this with you, with each other. And so, yeah, without any further ado, Andrew, why don't you take it away and give us a summary, a rundown, a quick 1-2 punch of what the chapter is about.
Well, of course, chapter 9, we're continuing on with our section 3, called, of course, Discernment. I just did a little, brief summary, brief description. Discernment is defined as the ability to notice the fine point details, the ability to judge something well, or the ability to understand and comprehend something. And the thing that this chapter covers is, talking about how there's certain aspects of life you can control, certain aspects you can't control. So understanding what those aspects are in your life and how you can affect those said aspects. So examples of can't control, health, economy, weather, what other people do, what other people think of us, death when it comes, things you can't control, what I ate for breakfast, coffee, usually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But biggest key aspect is he states that as long as we don't delude ourselves with the fact that we think we can control things, then we better understand what we can't control and can focus on these things.
Okay. So one of the things that Mickler kind of like gets into, and especially in relationship to this idea of discernment and idea of knowing what you can control and what you can't, he talks about these patterns, and like again, it's kind of weird to rehash it because we've already talked about it one time, but like we'll just go at it again. Like it does kind of feel like it's I feel like he kind of like goes a bunch of different directions in this chapter, like because he talks about a bunch of different things, but like this instance of where he's like, we try and find patterns where they don't exist, and it's like, okay, what exactly does that mean? And he goes into details about how it's people who are looking for a code or a cheat system or trying to figure out the way that everything is going to happen. And I guess to the extent that he brings up that if we're trying to solve the problems and trying to figure out the problems of the world, that we try to find the patterns for that. We try to figure out what the issues are. But in all honesty, it's just kind of confusing, um, because he brings in this idea of the investors, and that the investors, people who are investors, are trying to make it to where they create this code or this formula to try and figure out what is going to try and predict what the market is going to do later on. And he's saying that that's not possible. Now, I agree wholeheartedly with that, but it just kind of it kind of seems like, I don't know, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo, I feel like, with this particular part of the chapter that just doesn't really need to be there. I think if you just simply state like you can't solve all the problems in the world, and most of the problems in the world are going to be beyond our control anyway. And so I feel like that would be more along the lines, instead of talking about these patterns.
I go with that.
Yeah.
But like what I was saying, like you said, kind of hard to rehash it. more or less, you know, for me especially, like, do I look for patterns? Yeah, absolutely. Um, what kind of patterns? Great question. It's more or less not so much like there's a call out for the patterns we're looking for. It's more or less like, you know, we're looking for everyday solutions. Like, honestly, we look at life as like a problem as man. I know I do for sure. You know, if it's not a problem, then why would I be worried about it? You know what I mean? Like, you know, someone might come to me with a problem and, you know, being married or not being married, it's like they want you to listen, you know, your wives do, or somebody wants you to listen, they want you to understand, but they don't want it solved. It's like, you know, I'm just not that kind of person. You know, I want to solve the issue. Like, there's no point in not wanting to solve the issue. And so it's like, why why worry about it? You know, why make a big deal about it if you don't want it solved? So
Yeah.
definitely, I feel like I try and solve all the issues that come to me, be it, you know, hey, this or that. So absolutely 110% looking for, I mean, the pattern, the question, like you're saying, the patterns. Yeah, you know, besides like a stock market pattern, you know,
Hmm.
we discussed that in the book. You know, what other patterns are there? You know, you're looking for a pattern in the sense of like why someone acts the way they do towards you or something like that. And
Yeah, yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, we were talking about that.
you know, you're trying to solve that in your own head, so to speak. You know, why is it like this? You know, you're looking for a reason, but sometimes it's, who knows? You know, there's nothing you can't control everything. There's some variables you just don't understand.
Well, and even to that extent, like when you're if you're trying to figure out the pattern of making people like you, trying to get. I mean, I guess in this case, like if you want to say patterns that don't exist, if you're trying to find the pattern of how people are going to like you, like saying this joke at this particular time, wearing this type of clothing, designing your day around this particular activity, and then acting this certain way, like I think in that case, yeah, like again, going specifically more to that, you're not going to make everybody happy to be around you. You're not going to make everybody satisfied with who you are.
Right,
And so, because once you figure out a quote unquote pattern for making people like you, there's always going to be somebody out there who ends up not liking you. And even in relationship to like this podcast, like we had said earlier, like with this podcast, it's cool if people don't like us. We're not going to really change who we are. We might adjust like certain content. We may adjust and like try and figure out other things to talk about. But like who we are and whether you like us or not, it's not necessarily going to be whether that we're going to change ourselves and try and fit the pattern of whatever it is we're not going to fit the pattern of what like sells the most YouTube views. We're not, or sells the most podcast listens. We're not going to really buy into just. I mean, we could go out there, we could make a fool of ourselves. We could find the latest TikTok or YouTube trend and try and do that, or we could figure out the latest greatest podcasting algorithm or podcasting show and try to mimic them. But then that's not really being true to who we are. But I feel like that's just one small part of the discernment in the sense of realizing that that is out of our control. How people feel about us.
right,
So yeah.
absolutely. I agree 110%.
So what about this question? Do you feel like you need to figure out patterns in order to be a man?
I don't know that I need to, but it's just like, I don't know. It's kind of like bred into me, so to speak. Like, I feel
Yeah,
like,
like it's just kind of a man thing to do.
yeah, you just can't help it, you know? I guess I really can't help, like, wanting to solve issues, I guess, so to speak. So it's like, yes and no, almost.
Okay.
I
What
mean,
would you
I
What
want
would you say is like an issue that you try to solve that's like just unsolvable or just beyond your ability to solve? What would you say
to, I mean,
if you?
definitely, like, people liking me, you know, like, um, you know, I've had issues where certain individuals, you know, act like, everything's my fault or something like that. And like, no matter what I do, I try and like appease them, so to
Mm.
speak.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's like at the same time, you know, I can't really, I can't really change, their thought process of me or whatever it is. It's like
Right.
it's really not my. I mean, I guess in a sense it is my fault how they like me or don't like me, but there's some times where it's like doesn't matter what I do, they're never gonna like me. So why try, I guess, so to speak, or why stress out about it, or why make it a big deal? You know what I mean?
Well, I can understand it more from a perspective of like a husband wife kind of relationship, or even like a coworker kind of relationship where you're trying to make them be okay with you and make them like you, but then are you becoming? And I think in certain scenarios, like I think in certain things you can uh, do a little bit better for sure, but it's not going to be everybody's going to be cool with you. Everybody's going to be all right with how you talk or what you say or what you do or what we say on the podcast. And so I think those things are kind of ones that we're. I think that's more along the lines of what he's trying to say is that like you kind of want to be a better person for like the people that are closest to you, but you're not trying to be a jack of all trades and trying to make everybody like you just because it's it's not gonna be possible.
Absolutely.
Um so yeah, so then moving on to the next section of Memento Mori, which is Latin for remember that you must die, or remember you must die, or remember you will die, or remember you're gonna die. Okay. And and for me, like this is, and even for what Mickler is saying, is that th- this is, however like daunting or however scary, it should turn into a way of creating a motivation or a desire to live, and like how you live and what you are doing to live, but also not trying to allow the fear of death to cause you not to live, to cause you to take too many precautions, and to have the unnecessary fear of like doing certain things that could potentially harm you, or maybe not even harm you physically, but even like maybe mentally or emotionally or financially, those types of things.
Yeah, it's more or less like all the Latin terms is all about like seizing the moment, and time is fleeting. It's all about you know living life to the fullest. It's all about okay, I can't necessarily live in fear all my life and not have some kind of life. I mean, if you just
Mm-hmm.
live in fear, let's just live in a bubble somewhere and not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
He points out the whole time, the whole time where he was flying, and he had some turbulence and he kind of got scared, and like it affected him adversely in the sense of like he doesn't really want to fly anymore. That's at least that's how I took it. We talked about it. The way I was taking it was that's exactly how it was. He didn't really want to fly anymore. So it's like, at what point do you a let fear control you, and b know that that fear is controlling you to overcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I fear on everyday life, like I might make the wrong decision when it comes to like, different parts of, job aspects or livelihood or something like that. But it's like at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, just because I'm worried I might make a bad decision doesn't mean I'm gonna stop trying to make a decision.
Right. Right. Like I think kind of again going back to this idea that death is out of your control, and I think that that's like just an acceptance that we've got to have. But then also like not allowing the fear of things that we can't control consume us. Again, like going back to the idea of the economy or the weather, like for instance, tornadoes running through. Kentucky and stuff like that. You know, just like you can't live in fear of those things always happening and not be able and allow that to paralyze your life. You know, allow that to cause you to be scared to live fully. Um, so speaking of which, like, are there any unnecessary fears that you think that you might have? Like, are there any things that you can think about that, you know, a you don't really have control over whether that's going to happen or not, or whether that's going to become an issue or not later on. But are there any unnecessary fears that you might have that are preventing you from doing stuff?
I mean, not necessarily like a fear for me doing stuff, but definitely like a stronger, what's the word? A stronger,
Concern.
yeah, a stronger, not concern, stronger, how to explain it? A stronger, I don't know, more things weighing on the decisions I make. You know, it's not a fear, but it's like, you know, if I make the wrong decision, then yeah, like, you know, where do I go from here? You know,
Okay.
like
All
it's
right.
like there's not really a you know, it's me being in control of my life versus, you know, someone else being able to dictate what I do right or wrong.
Yeah. 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 Um, I guess like one of the things I guess one of the things, actually, it's really interesting. Actually, it's kind of good that we're recording this, even though we already recorded one and we lost that. Like, recording this now, I actually did have a bit of a conversation that might be more tied into this kind of idea of fear. So, obviously, with COVID still kind of running rampant, and every once in a while there will be a COVID case that happens here in China. Um, Tomorrow, my wife and I are heading to a Christmas market here in Shanghai, and we're planning on going. Excuse me. We're planning on going with some friends or some colleagues of mine from work, and I asked one of my colleagues. I said, hey, do you and your wife and your kid want to go to the Christmas market? And he said, oh, no, we can't go. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, I'm just thinking it's timing issue or some kind of um, thing that's happening on their end. And basically, what he said is he said basically his wife is concerned about COVID, and so is not wanting to go out of the house in a large group of people. Like, he would be okay with it. His daughter would be okay with it, but his wife is concerned, and potentially the daughter would kind of like take a clue from the wife and be concerned about potentially getting COVID. And I didn't think about it until just now, but like that to me like is like the epitome of this idea that theoretically you can't really control whether you're going to get COVID or not. Like, you can do a certain number of things to kind of prevent yourself. Like, you don't want to like go out there and be like trying to like make out with people who might potentially have COVID, or like go and like suck air when you hear somebody like hacking up a lung or something like that. You don't want to like run over there and be like, thanks for that. I love it so much. You don't want to do that, obviously, but you can't really prevent yourself. Like, I mean, COVID cases pop up every once in a while around the way, but in order, like, if that's what's preventing you from doing something is your concern or your fear of COVID, and it's like you like it's really difficult to control that. Like, you can prevent some to an extent, but in all honesty, if you get COVID, you get COVID. Like, it sucks. You don't want it. I'm not saying like you should go out there and try and get it, but I mean, I think that
You
is
don't
an
you don't
incredibly
think you don't think we should go out and try and get it?
no. Well, I mean, no. I'm not gonna say that because we're putting this on YouTube, bro. Like, we can't. We're
I'm
we're putting this
joking.
out on podcasts. We can't really be telling people, hey, go out and get you some COVID. Go suck in some COVID. Just thanks for the COVID. I appreciate that. You don't really need. We don't really need that kind of like hellfire and brimstone to be fired down upon us from the higher ups. But no, but more along the
It
lines.
it was a joke.
I know. YouTube. and podcast apps. We're just joking. Okay, promise. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
Just joking. Anyway, so but yeah, to me that would be, and I'm trying to think like what might be a fear of mine. I guess ultimately like maybe a fear that I've got is I think something along the lines like kids. I think kids are kind of a fear, like having kids. Not because not really because not really because like I'm afraid of like raising them and stuff like that. It's not even that. It's more so just kind of like, to be honest, seeing how crazy things have gotten, um, both in my country and in the world. Not in China, but like in the U.S. and in the world. Because one of the goals would be for us to eventually like come back or head back to the U.S. But being able to like raise our child in this environment, I'm concerned about it. I'm like kind of worried about it. But how the child grows up, to some extent, I have a small amount of control over. But at some point in time, that child's going to have to start making its own decisions and doing its own things. And I can't control that. I will not be able to control how my child ultimately responds to certain things. All I can really do is just hope, pray, try and guide them as best as I can. Try to make sure that they understand that I am someone that they can come and talk to about anything. And but yeah, it's kind of a scary thought for what's around the future and what's coming around the bend. So yeah.
Always is. Always is.
So speaking of which, speaking of future, like the next section that Mickler gets into is this idea of the past and the future. Well, the past, present, and future, but where he talks about how the past and the future, it's great to kind of like reflect on them. It's great to kind of think about them, but they can actually become stumbling blocks for being like for your discernment. They can be stumbling blocks for becoming a better person. And so, like, he mentions that you need to use the past and let it be a tool for learning things that you've messed up, that you can go back and use as like, okay, I need to learn from this. I made this mistake or I messed up here. The past shouldn't be a thing that you regret or something that you wish you could go back. I mean, obviously, like, people are always going to regret certain decisions, or they're going to wish that they could go back. But I think it's different if you regret it, and wish to go back versus actually, like, I think you can like think about it and be like, man, I wish I hadn't done that. Like, you can be, I guess not regret. I guess regret's not really the word there, but I guess you could be like disappointed in what you did in the past, but then just using that as a learning tool versus like really beating yourself up for not taking that job or not going to that school or not dating that girl or not um, getting going on that trip, instead of regretting it, just use that as a learning experience of like, oh yeah, that thing. Because like for me, for instance, and I'm gonna shoot this question over to you here in a bit. So get yourself mentally prepared and start coming up with ideas. But one of the things that I know in the past that I kind of wish that I could go back and change was and I know we mentioned this earlier, but it still is to this idea that I wish I could go back and tell myself to take a year off of school instead of going directly into school, because I think it. One of the things is I think for me it was a challenging getting out of high school where you have kind of like the restrictions of your parents, and then getting into university where there are no restrictions and basically you can kind of you're in charge of yourself. Um, I kind of wish that I had taken a year off before getting into university, because I kind of got into university based on what other people were thinking, what other people were doing, where other people were going. And then, basically did 2 years of nothing, that of worthless stuff, and then eventually got around to taking 3 years off and realizing, oh, during those 3 years, realizing I need to go back to school. But instead of going back and regretting that, like, I can see that as an issue, as a thing where it's like, number one, I shouldn't have gone because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do in the future. Like, I wasn't sure. But then also looking back and being like, okay, I was not mature then. I was not diligent with my time. I would waste, and I would say I have learned from it, in the sense that for years I would stay up late, playing games or doing some kind of form of entertainment, and then I would go to bed, and then I wouldn't get up early in the morning because even if I had class or even if I had something else. But now, you know, I'm being more responsible because I realized, like, you've got to have that responsibility. There was something that just kind of like clicked throughout, just seeing failure after failure after failure. There was something that clicked, and I was like, I've got to be more diligent about going to bed on time, getting up early. I can't stay up late. I have to be responsible. So, what about you? Something from the past that you may regret a little bit, but something that you are using as, or trying to use it as a tool to learn from.
I mean, what don't I regret from the past? It's just it could be just the widest topic ever. I don't know. I had started school earlier, maybe not work somewhere so long. I mean, you just can't dwell on it, honestly. I mean, there's no point in stressing about it. There's things that I would love to have changed, and then there's things that I mean, who cares if it
But
changes
what
or
are
doesn't?
what are some lessons that you learned? Say like either from staying at a job too long or from not starting school earlier. Like, what would you say is a lesson that you've learned in that, or lessons that you've learned?
Um, well, like I said, if I'd known about schooling systems a little better, like I could have like graduated with more degrees.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't like the idea of owing Uncle Sam anything, and then at the same time I was lazy to really start school, so it's kind of like, what honestly, like, what didn't I learn? I mean, like there's just so many aspects of uh, um, so many different things that I could have done differently that would have changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Honestly, it's kind of like a grand scheme of things. I could have been like 10 times. I could have been done with school 10 times quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I could have graduated eight different degrees by now. But
Mm-hmm.
I did learn some life lessons, in the sense of, like, I saw where you were going to school, and like you weren't really using your time wisely. It kind of taught me, maybe I shouldn't do it so
Mm-hmm.
quickly as you did. So at the same time, it's like good and bad almost. Good,
Yeah.
good for one degree, bad for another. It is what it is at the end of the day.
I think one of the things too that people struggle with as far as their past goes is looking at the to quote Life of Brian the musical. Um, Bro, you got to stop breathing into the mic. It
Sorry,
just all I'm hearing is and I'm like, oh my god, like, what is happening?
I'm trying to keep it from my brother.
I appreciate that, but yeah, you're like right here, you're like.
Just
So,
have a moment.
anyway, one of the things that I think is kind of challenging for and Mike. Well, I think one of the challenging things for people is when they look back and they're disappointed in what has happened. I think it would be good to kind of like look at the things that were positive that came out of that. Like I would say, even though I kind of wish that I could go back and take a year off, I'm actually kind of grateful for like going through the hard lessons, like being the first one in our family to go to university. It was kind of like a stumble as I go along, and so realizing that, it took me years to finally get to the point where now I realize, like, even though it would have been nice to get done earlier, I'm actually kind of grateful for where I am, because, like, had I gotten done earlier, chances are we would have never moved to Tennessee. Probably would have never been there. If I had done it earlier, I probably wouldn't have met all the lovely people down there in Tennessee. But also, it would be highly likely, like I can see where there's a trajectory of, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be married to my wife. I wouldn't be living in Shanghai and doing, even potentially doing this podcast, had it not been for making those mistakes earlier on. And so kind of learning to accept that, I would say, is like learning from the past and realizing, okay, there's some things that I need to fix in relationship to my motivation, but also learning that it's okay, like, to have mess ups in the past. It's okay to have those problems. So,
It is.
yeah. Uh, the other part is the future, talking about using it as a tool to motivate us into action. And that the future shouldn't be where you are romanticizing your life or trying to live vicariously through others, seeing other people being successful and then trying to, or just watching them be successful and trying to live through them in that sense. And I would even venture to say, I don't do this because I don't have any children, but I think as a father, maybe potentially one of the challenges could be that you're trying to, you kind of see where you kind of like messed up, and you're trying to get your kids to follow along a certain path that you want them to do because you didn't get to do that path. And so you're trying to push that on them instead of trying to develop them. And I'm not saying you're doing this. What I'm saying is, I just know that there are probably people out
Sure,
there
sure,
who
it doesn't
who
matter.
do
Sure,
that.
sure. That's not what you're saying at all. Yeah, sure.
No, no, no. I mean, I don't know if you
No, no,
are
no,
doing that.
no, no,
That
no.
may be that may be if it's something you're doing, then stop it.
Um. So for me, planning for the future, everything's been geared towards me graduating as an engineer.
Yep.
Now that that day has come,
Hopefully.
by the way, my grades are in, so
Oh
I
yeah.
I did I did graduate.
Yeah. Sweet. So all done.
Well, for
Well.
now, for
So what do you
now,
mean? What do you mean for now?
I might go for a master's or something like that.
Oh, I mean that's okay, but I mean, yeah, now you have a bachelor's. How long did it take you to finally get it?
I think 1 year less than you.
Like, are we talking like 1 year school timing, or are we talking like 1 year real time?
1 year real time.
So so that means I have to include the 3 years that I had off.
Right.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Because
So
I took a semester off. I took a semester off too when
oh,
my
okay,
kids were
okay.
born. So
All right,
you know.
all right.
That being said, now that the moment's here, it's like, where do I go from here? Like what am I going to do now? What should I do now? What can I do now? There's so much
Mm-hmm.
free time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I kind of hadn't really thought of that. I reached one goal now. What's my next goal?
More podcasts.
More podcasts. No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
What? What?
No, no. For me,
What?
it's yes and no. I mean, the podcasts are more your thing, but I'm all for supporting your dreams. Um, reading more books. Not
That'd be good.
So where do I go from here? Like what am I gonna start doing? So, that ties in the whole planning for the future and then having that fear of where the future or what the future holds for me. I did take a job somewhere, but whether or not that's the right choice,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how long should I stay there? Should I move somewhere else? There's just so many thousands of things. There's just I mean, the future is mine, but
Yeah.
what it'll be, when it'll be, where it'll be, you know, who knows? And then the other
Yeah.
thing is like back to the past. It's like, you know, if I had known what I wanted to do sooner, yeah, I could have done so much more, or already been
Hmm.
so far ahead, or had it so much easier without kids and having to study and stay up late and work their full time job. It's just all these different things could have been so much better. But like again, it's like I'm not gonna fear the future. I'm not gonna regret the past. I'm gonna just set some goals and move forward.
Yep. Yep. One step at a
You know,
time.
that's my problem as a man. Where do I go from here?
Yeah. So so yeah. So I think that can kind of get us into the mindset that he presents, where you can focus only on what you can control. And kind of going back to this idea that like really we don't know what happens in the future. We're not sure what's going to come down the line, especially now that you're done with school. Like you're not sure exactly what it entails, and so keeping that in mind, where there are just things like, even though we want to control it all, we want to know everything that's going to come down the pike. We can't, like, there's no way that we can definitively know that, and so we have to know that we can't control it, and we have to accept that we can't control it. We've got to just kind of like wrap our minds around that,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, absolutely. As long as you know that there's going to be times you won't be able to do something, or there's going to be times you can and shouldn't do something. Like you just really have to know, like, where what are you going to do to bide your time? Like, bide your
Mm-hmm.
time wisely. Don't fret about it. Don't be scared to make a decision. Don't let fear just control you, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. Just live your life, dream,
Yeah. Yeah,
be
yeah.
the best you.
Do you agree with what he says about being at the mercy of God, or being at the mercy of the universe, or the mercy of chance?
I think it's crazy that we just had the conversation last night, but I, I
It
think
was earlier today for me. I'm like we talked about this. I know.
I think yes and no. I think there's a plan for a life, so to speak,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I feel like you know, could you have controlled anything? I don't know that you could have necessarily. Like how much control do you have versus, if you tried to change it, what would the outcome have been?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense at all.
I think so. I think also, like, this idea that while there are things that are beyond our control and that we are at the mercy of, and even to an extent, like you say, like government, like you're kind of just at the mercy of it. You can control to some extent what goes on through like voting or through actions and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's kind of this idea that when like there are things that are beyond our control, but also I think you can affect it to some extent, and you can definitely affect how you interact with whatever is going on out out in the world and stuff like that. Just the chance of like COVID all of a sudden popping up and causing issues for the past 2 years, can't really, do much with that. It's just it's kind of been a challenge, and will continue to be a challenge constantly. And so just still living your life and still handling what you can.
It's
Um,
been a roller coaster of fun.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say that, like, again, not so much here, but it's just preventing us from being able to go out and do anything outside of the country. That's probably the worst part of it, for us here. I mean, we've been healthy and safe, and so but needing to be mindful of not being able to leave the country for now. But anyway, so going back to this idea of discernment, and going back to this idea of being in control of what you can control. Let's talk about the skill set that he presents. So the first thing, and again, I just kind of feel like this is kind of just out there. Like it doesn't really develop discernment. I don't think it's like, or I mean, maybe it does, but he says daily planning that you need to plan every day. And I would definitely say like this is one of the things that I definitely struggle with. I suck at this, especially on the weekends. Normally on the weekdays, just because I work and I've got it kind of like set up for a time. On the weekdays, I'm like, no problem. I can handle it. Like even to an extent. But I will say it's pretty much just the job that I've got planned. Like I know what time the job starts, and I know what time I finish. Pretty much anything in between that, I'm working. I'm just doing my teaching or getting ready for classes and stuff like that. And I would definitely say I've gotten better about the in between work time. But then like afterwards, if my wife is here, generally I want to spend time with her. If she's not here, generally I could be doing something else, but I don't plan for it. And so generally I'll get on here and I'll be like, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to get back. I'm going to, when I get back home, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to watch YouTube. And like going back to that, like living vicariously through other people, watching YouTube has definitely been that for me, like where I'm watching YouTube and it's not really living through them, but it's more just not doing anything to help my future. It's just kind of just coming and being lazy and doing stuff for entertainment. And
Right.
so, yeah, like
I understand. I
I
understand.
need to
Yeah,
work this.
I have the same problem. Or it's funny is like you can always plan for something, but then when it comes down to it and you try to execute this plan, you know, how quickly does your plan just get shot all the crap? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, it's like pretty much, there's only so much you can control. So at what point do you know that it's out of your control? I guess so to
Yeah.
speak.
Like I feel like this idea of daily planning and then his next one of like this tactic focused, I feel like this would be under something else. Like I don't feel like it's a way of like guiding discernment. Like save for maybe the idea of daily planning is this idea of controlling what you can control, right?
Right.
If you wake up in the morning, or like what time you wake up in the morning, planning that out, planning how the day is going to go, like at the beginning part or throughout the thing, like that's something you can control. But to me, it's just kind of like I don't know, maybe it's more along the lines of like a self control kind of thing. Maybe that's what this discernment is supposed to be, is this idea of self control. But he's bringing up controlling other things, but things that you can control. I guess like attitude or whether you work out or how much weight you are, those types of things. Um, yeah,
Work out. What is this you talking about?
yeah,
Working
yeah,
out,
yeah,
man. That's unheard of. But yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Like I think for those I think if you plan, he says non-negotiables because like those are those things you control that might help reduce all the uncontrollable variables or
yeah,
what's happening. Exercise, reading. Different things that just it's kind of like a growth thing. If you're not growing, you're basically dying. Is
yeah,
the quote I've always heard. So yeah, so like those should just be the how to say it, those should just be bam there, and then after that you plan accordingly for your day. Not just setting goals, but setting the standards to meet your goals.
hmm
And,
I will
I
tell
agree
you
with
I will tell you
saying
a
earlier.
non-negotiable. A non-negotiable for me is coffee.
I agree. I mean, this 100%. You know, how
Yeah.
quickly do I brew a cup? But no,
Figuring out. Yeah.
I really that could have gone like so many other different ways. I was like, oh crap, what's he gonna say? No, but I agree.
Yeah.
Like you could really you could really not really just mess up, but the controllable aspects of things. what would happen if you didn't plan for it, or what would you have to change, or there's so many variables, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you set a goal, you set a standard to meet the goal, and then you execute those standards to try and attain your goal. And he's basically just like saying you need to do that every day. And it's like, yes, I know, if you plan out your day that thoroughly, how much are you really living,
Yeah, yeah,
But then if you plan out your day that thoroughly, how much more time do you have during the day to do other things you want to do?
yeah. I do like. I mean, I don't have any issues with his skill sets as far as like daily planning. And this next one where it's tactic focused, like I like these. I just don't know if they're under the discernment thing. I guess they are things that you can control, but I'm not 100% sure how that is. But like being focused in this idea of like not focusing on the end goal, right? Not focusing too heavily on I need to lose. I know he says 20 pounds. Scratch that. I'm like I need to lose like a good solid 50 pounds, and so like losing 50 pounds, like he's like, if you focus on that goal, like that's just a goal with too many variables, like too many things that could go wrong. But if he's like, think about it like in the things that you can control, drinking a certain amount of water a day, exercising a certain amount of time a day, eliminating certain foods to help you in that process. And like being mindful of those goals, but using the smaller goals, and I guess it can go back to daily planning, using the smaller tactics to get there instead of just thinking about that goal and only thinking about that and not actually like laying out a plan to get yourself there.
I agree.
So, do you have any goals that you are there any goals that you have that we can brainstorm some tactics for that are in your control, like any ideas of future endeavors? Like I can say I would say definitely like with this podcast for instance, like getting it going, like where eventually like the plan is for me to be able to start editing a little bit more, like being able to put in a few more things, being able to add certain things and getting better at doing the editing side of things for it, like on to put onto YouTube, or even to put these things in, like maybe creating some sounds and stuff like that to put into like the audio version, where it's more interesting, it's more or not more interesting, but it becomes more um, palatable, for the different audiences. And so, but that's like a really big thing. And so I can go in and do a little bit at a time, like adding little bitty things every new video, like okay, let me try and add this, or let me try and do this. That way it creates that way it's more tactic focused versus worrying about the big goal at the end of like being a popular brother podcast.
I agree. I don't know, like I said, like it's kind of like I kind of have. I had a goal, and like my new goal is, I do need to brainstorm honestly and think about what I'm going to do with my life, what I want to be when I grow up. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
funny to say that, but yeah, at this point, it's still kind of up in the air. I'm still trying to like wrap my head around graduating. I don't know. The other thing is like, with my degree, like as far as a job goes, like there's so many different jobs you can get. Like there's so many different backgrounds and I don't know positions you can hold with such a degree. It's like now what do I want to do with my degree now that I have it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know.
I
But
gotcha.
I think like he says, create a plan, set a standard, execute the standards, and then go from there.
Yep.
That's all I can do, honestly.
That's all anybody can do. Well, good. I think we can wrap it up. So final words. Do you have any final words that you want to let the people know?
Remember, you must die. I'm just joking.
Nice. I mean, that's really it. I would say control what you can control. Let the rest just kind of happen, and just be mindful of your emotions if things go haywire. Just be mindful of that. Um, Plan your days out. Focus on the tactics. Those would be just the tips that Mickler says, and I think those are the tips that will help you just in life. Probably the biggest one as far as discernment goes is just really get over that mental hurdle of you can't control everything, and just get
Absolutely.
your mind around that. Okay. To everybody who's listening, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a review or both. That would be fantastic. That would be much appreciated. If you are on YouTube, subscribe, like, click the bell, leave a comment. If you want to, you can listen to our entire sovereignty series by clicking up here. Or if you want to see the most recent chapter or the most recent episode where I was just on my own out in the sea by myself, click over here. And as always, you can subscribe by clicking down here. I'm Nick.
I'm Andrew.
And remember, you have an open invitation to our conversation.